right, welcome to Balm and the Burnout. Today, I'm so excited to have my friend and former classmate, Taylor Brorby. Taylor Brorby is the author of 3 books: Boys in Oil, Growing Up Gay in a Fractured Land; second book, Crude Poems. And the third book is Coming Alive, Action and Civil Disobedience. And he's the co-editor of Fracture, Essays, Poems, and Stories on Fracking in America. Taylor's work has appeared in the New York Times, the Huffington Post, Literary Hub, Orion Magazine, and is widely anthologized. Taylor's work has been supported by fellowships from the National Book Critics Circle, the McDowell Colony, Mesa Refuge, and the Stone Barns Center for Food and Agriculture. He has been interviewed about his work on MSNBC and NPR, and serves on the editorial boards of Hub City Press and Terrain.org. A contributing editor at North American Review, he teaches in the MFA program at the University of Alabama. And fun fact, Taylor and I went to undergrad together at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. So throwback, but here we are now. It's 2025 and we're together again.
Surviving and hopefully thriving, Megan.
Let's hope for it. Well, thanks again for being here today. You know, this bio, it really speaks to who you are, right? You're so many things. And I'm curious if you want to speak to who you're becoming these days.
Well, first, thanks for having me on your program, Megan. It's wonderful to reconnect in this way. And it's a question I rarely get asked as a writer: who am I becoming? Because most of the time as a writer, we sit alone in a room and scribble on our yellow legal pads or type on a computer and talk out loud to ourselves and say we're channeling different voices. I think as I'm getting closer to 40 now, which feels so odd to say, I think I'm becoming a much more grounded person. I think I'm still that bubbly, extroverted, Truman Capote type homosexual bouncing around. Yet there's a lot more craving in my life right now for calm, steadiness. Some type of 23-year-old me would hate what I'm about to say. Routine. My day, when I'm living sort of my best life and think, oh, this is the person I really want to become, and this is how I want to operate. It looks like mornings are given over to writing until about noon, and then in the afternoon going and exercising, and then starting cocktail hour around 5 with friends and cooking dinner and having a lovely evening, either with those friends or in reading or listening to music or watching a movie. And if that could be my life from now until the earthworms have their way with me, I would be a very happy ginger. That's the type of person I'm trying to become, because I think in routine, I also get the things done that I want to. I feel a sense of calm, maybe not outright control, but feel like I have a handle on my life. And I sort of like to live a simple life in those ways, but life that feels that's creative, taking care of myself, but also filled with relationships too.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear your values infused in this becoming. I hear just that groundedness and how that not only supports you, but supports your community, the community building, the teaching, your artistry, your writing. You know, I've heard there's something about those morning pages.
Yeah, that's right. Julia Cameron, she's just there with us looking over it. I have to tell you, though, on that, I mean, years ago, I was a night shift worker as a writer. I would start at 11 and work till 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And I had shifted all my teaching in the afternoon I still needed my 8 hours of sleep. I can't tell you how refreshing it is to wake up at noon and have most all of the emails you're going to get for the day in, and then you could just knock them out and be done with them rather than trickling in. But then during the plague times, being awake at that time of day or night got kind of eerie, because that's also when you're alone and no one's up, which used to be why writing at that time was so good. No one would bother me. But then before vaccines and things like this, I kept, then all those dark thoughts started swirling around. I'm like, no one's really around. So I
Mm-hmm.
shifted to the morning because it just felt, okay, I'm waking up early. I'm going to wake up before the world wakes up and try to start my work. But then it'll be the daytime and then I'll go to, it's almost like being a kid who's scared of the dark in some ways. But now it is morning pages, Megan, to your point.
Yeah. And what a sweet noticing for yourself of just the loneliness, the things that come up, the things that shift. And I think
Yeah.
people don't often do that with routines. They're just like, oh, this isn't working for me anymore. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that, right? But you're obviously committed to your craft. You're a writer. You're going to keep writing. So being open to shifting those routines so they fit with your needs as they change over time.
Yeah, I think I was feeling more like round peg, square hole syndrome or something, and thought this is no longer working for me. And this is such a part of my identity. And being a writer feels more like who I am rather than what I do. And I love waking up. It used to be being up late at night, but I love waking up to that mindset of saying, oh, I get to wake up in my imagination. And for 2 to 4 hours every morning, really, it's almost like a meditative practice. Even if
Mm-hmm.
writing doesn't get done, it's the commitment to operating in that same headspace every day and thinking eventually over time something will come. It's like practicing as a musician. You practice your scales and your arpeggios and they serve their purpose. So I think showing up to the work and having a certain mindset every day really is helpful. It's like mental flossing, I guess.
Love that. Yeah. And you talked about just how much presence you have in that routine. And is there just another time in your life, maybe outside of that routine, where you felt just really present?
Yeah, I think I have felt really present, if we can go really dark here, in moments of death. I mean, this
Mm-hmm.
has really been on my mind in the last year. A year ago in April, my oldest nephew, who was 18, about to graduate high school, was killed. And there is a certain, not only clarity, and I don't mean clarity in that cliched way about like, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Thank you, Mary Oliver. May you rest in peace. But a real heightening of the senses. Like, I can remember each day up through that funeral. And then after the funeral, it's sort of like being so on to the dynamics of family, of my sister and her loss, my nephews losing a brother. It is in sharp relief in my memory, Megan, and how I felt. I can even feel it in my body as we're talking about that. I felt really present in that moment. And I also felt present in that loss, which
Mm-hmm.
maybe sounds almost contradictory in some way. I I of course felt the spiraling thing. You're losing someone you love. And I immediately felt how much beautiful space my nephew occupied in my life. And so I felt really present to that loss. And then needing to seek tools to help me process that loss. I'm still processing that loss,
Mm-hmm.
and I am not a person who is resistant to therapy. I didn't have an ongoing therapy practice at that point, but got back into one a few months after my nephew's death. I, like most people probably say when they're starting up, I waited too long, but I felt in that time, those months, I was really present. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, present maybe in an overwhelming way.
Yeah. Yeah. Present with the grief
Yeah,
that keeps rolling, and that grief is hard to hold on your own. And so,
yeah. And we
that,
are a culture that does not do grief well, to be honest. I
no.
mean, my sister had told me months later, in her official work documents, their company policy is that she would have 3 bereavement days. I mean, can you imagine you lose a child and you almost have to go, well, I hope you lose your child on, a Tuesday so you can have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, come back to work on. I mean, that's just, it's crazy,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and to think of how quickly our world, our American culture wants us to, quote, get back to normal, even though our new normal is not what our past was anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that. I think culture is a huge thing. And so even just you honoring your own needs and maybe that time when you did wait a little bit, it always takes so long to, you're like,
Yeah.
the referral goes through and then you have to schedule. And then the first session with the therapist is always, diagnostic. And you're like,
Yes.
I just need to talk. Like,
Right.
wow.
And then when you do start talking, you're like, this is a random stranger I'm just bawling in front of. And okay, our time's up. Okay, I'll see you next week.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
very, yeah, but so important. I have found, I mean, I feel so much more, to your questions, grounded and present
Mm-hmm.
in my life. And my therapist has a phrase that's really, it really works for me as a writer and a teacher too, where she'll say, if I'm feeling a certain way, well, that's just something to be curious about.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be curious about that? Not judge it, just be curious about it. And I thought, oh yeah, I can be curious. So it's been
Yeah.
very helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I just, thank you for speaking of that authentic grief and how the dual line of that presence of feeling it all and having those heightened senses while also, having this presence on the other side where
Yeah.
like you have this, you know, whatever it is, greater appreciation for life, like better understanding of your time with the people that you love, right? It provides that perspective no matter how hard it is.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I really see you living that. I know you're also writing about these themes too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. When you're a memoirist like I am, you have to go back into those emotions and recreate them in such a way that the reader feels them. So this is often too why in memoir classes or nonfiction writing, we really advise our students, are you ready to write about it? You might
mm-hmm,
never be ready to write about it, or it might only be in journal writing, because part of it is you have to, if not relive it, really think about, oh, what was I feeling in that moment and how can I shape a story around that to help the reader feel that. I mean, it is like a magic trick, but it can be a risky magic trick for the writer themselves if they're not at a place where they've been processing that.
for sure. I'm hearing hints of that idea of burnout coming in for an
Yeah.
artist who, you know, the content that you're working on or whatever it is brings up stuff that you need additional support with. So,
Yeah.
how have you experienced burnout in your work and what do you do to remediate that?
Yeah. I think I am a self-described, probably not in how most America views it, but a type of workaholic. I mean, it's to that earlier comment of being a writer is more who I am rather than what I do. When I'm talking to you right now, I'm thinking about, okay, how is Megan's head slightly tilted? How would I describe the background color on her wall? Like I've got this stream of light in front of me looking like a sword's going to cut off my head or something. So you're constantly noticing, and that's something that can be exhausting at times, to really pay strict attention, whether I'm writing actually about you or it becomes a way of thinking through what I'm writing about. Being scheduled has helped with the burnout, but I am also someone who, I move at a pretty quick pace, not like physically. I don't believe in running or things like that, but that I can write quickly and confidently, and I'm not a very patient person with the way that the publishing industry, which is a major controller of my life, works, because it's much slower than
Mm-hmm.
I am. And burnout to me has really looked like having too much time to stew and not moving projects forward. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my life is so around writing, since I really think of my writing as also in service to people, that if I tell my story really well, it helps other people feel less alone. I mean, it's why we read, as the character C.S. Lewis said in the play Shadowlands, we read to know we're not alone. And so I really like that idea as a writer to think my writing isn't for me, it is for others, not that I can solve their issues. I relate burnout to being frustrated. Maybe they're the two sides of the same coin in a way of feeling like things are stagnant. Why aren't things moving forward? And I don't mean to say, why am I not more successful? It's just sort of getting those projects out the door so you can also let go of them. So they're not
Mm-hmm.
kind of cluttering your mind or creating kind of like a calcified buildup in your brain. And you're having to do the constant like jerk back of like, oh, do I need to do something different so that that project seems sexier so someone will take it? Those are the times when I usually need to go on a little like vacation or
Mm-hmm.
research trip. I mean, it's usually when I need to go fly fishing. Before our official conversation, we were talking, and I keep thinking if I'm pinging around in my mind too much, I really need to go out and reconnect with nature. And for me, that does look usually like fly fishing because there's nothing better to cool your tubes than standing in a cold stream for like 6 or 8 hours. It's better than a deep tissue massage, and it's back to that way of noticing. Oh, I'm noticing an eagle fly, or maybe there's a martin that comes down to the bank. But I also think investing in my health is a way that I've really avoided out. I've been close to burnout. I wouldn't say I've ever officially burned out where I feel so incapacitated or I need a career change or things like this. But when it's been getting close is when I've not been prioritizing my physical health as well. And so those are just simple things, getting out in nature and exercising, which both are moving my body. I think in American culture, we can become so screen dependent or sedentary that if we just ingest or inject, excuse me, maybe ingest healthy foods, but also inject a little movement in our lives, dancing. I regularly dance alone around my apartment. It just helps me feel good. And so I'm a sort of hedonist for pleasure in those ways.
Love that so much. And I think I'm also hearing, and I just kind of want to bring this a little bit back to integrative health because what you described sounds so much to me like some of the philosophy behind energy medicine when you were
Mm,
talking about a creative project stewing and sitting in your brain too long and it literally starting to feel like a calcified thing in your brain.
yeah.
Some of the pieces around energy medicine, the philosophies are that we have these many different energetic bodies beyond the physical body.
Mm,
And when something starts to bother us, it kind of starts in those external bodies and start making their
yep.
way in and start affecting the physical body. And so your intuition to say, I know what I need right now, let's go fly fishing, and how that supports just the relaxation of tension, your presence, everything that we know about how
Mm,
nature can provide health and well being. I think that was just fascinating to me how you described knowing that it starts to feel like that and noticing the symptoms for you feel like,
yeah.
the pinging around in your brain. We really need a break, right? And
Yep.
so you're actively doing that when you reach close to those points so that you can keep doing your work.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think we have an odd, work is probably my favorite 4 letter word, but I think of work as separate from my job. It is really related to that concept of vocation, I guess. It is something that brings me pleasure, but it also, again, is back to that service idea. So thinking that there's plenty of work to be doing these days, and it might be difficult work, but also there's an element of joy in that work. And so that's why it feels like such an important part of my life to be focused on my work because it benefits me as well. It's not just saying, oh, I'm like the Oracle of Alabama disseminating knowledge across the world here. It's really about being in deep relationship with myself as well.
Yeah. Thank you for reframing that and offering an alternate definition. I mean, I think too, I read your bio, but there isn't a lot about, the other things that you do for your work, some of this community-based activism, environmentalism. So do you want to just share a little bit of what sparks you with that kind of edge these days?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in swimming in a lake that never freezes in North Dakota, and every lake should freeze. The reason that is because the water of that reservoir was used to cool the coal-fired turbine engines of the power plant where my mother worked. And so I really view that as growing up in a landscape of lies because I was told every lake in North Dakota freezes. Well, my home lake doesn't. I mean, in January, Megan, you and I could sit in that lake with stocking caps on when it's 20 below and it'd be bathtub warm. And so that creates very curious questions in a little boy as you grow up in that type of landscape of noticing, of questioning baseline stories or facts as well. And so I think it implanted in me not a resistance to authority, but a curiosity to say, is this the complete story that I'm getting? Is there only one way to view a situation, whether that's a historical narrative or daily reality? Is this the only way to view the situation I'm in? Could I think about it at a right angle? But my life has really gone from thinking about sustainability. When we were back in college, I studied a lot with this wonderful professor, Jim Farrell, who, just put the world into color from black and white for me of thinking, oh my gosh, everything is related to environmental thinking about how do we design buildings for health, both environmentally and also for us. Why do we put people in cubicles, which are soul killing, and then it moved into other areas of fossil fuel production, being a coal baby, to oil with the Bakken oil boom in my home state at the time of the Bakken oil boom from roughly 2006 to 2014. North Dakota was the second highest oil producing state in the country. And that just changed the whole landscape. It became like the lake of fire, like what I was taught in Lutheran Sunday school, like in the book of Revelations. At night the horizon flickered from the flaring of natural gas in North Dakota. It gave off more light pollution than Minneapolis, St. Paul, but it was from flares rather than street lamps. And so those questions were in my mind about what's my responsibility, what's my role. I mean, my family has benefited from the fossil fuel industry. We're not the Rockefellers. I mean, I grew up in a trailer house in a county without a stoplight, but still, that industry put food on my family's table and paid for my saxophone lessons. And so I really thought of environmental thinking and coming from a place that no one visits. I mean, North Dakota is the least visited state in the country. I thought I had a real role to play in my writing to show how beautiful, excuse me, how beautiful my home state is, because I think we often destroy things that feel threatening or we don't understand or we think of them as ugly. And so
Mm-hmm.
I thought if I could write really beautifully, because I do view my home state as beautiful, it just takes longer to appreciate its beauty than, say, the Tetons or going and seeing the redwoods. So I thought there was a real role to write about the natural world in my life, to try to protect it, to protect a place I love. So it's a big preoccupation of mine.
Mm. And what I'm hearing too is that your practice of being present and seeing the beauty in your homeland, in the people, in the benefit that these extractive industries have had in your life, that helps you weave together this story,
Yeah.
right? And just the impact that you have with story on people's lives. And I just wanted to spend a moment talking about that, just how your books and your teaching do support that healing. How does storytelling help us heal?
Boy, it's so wonderful to encounter characters, poems, stories on the page where you go, oh my God, I thought I was the only one that thought that way, but here it is. And usually it's said in a better way than I could ever think it. So I just, I've had that experience so much in life. I mean, that's why reading has been so important. It's not just to get information. It's back to that the C.S. Lewis never said this, but the character in that play that is C.S. Lewis in Shadowlands, when I just think about that so often, we read to know we're not alone. And you can feel that whether you're reading Plato, who says, be kind for everyone's fighting a difficult battle, or reading an essay by Zora Neale Hurston called How It Feels to Be Colored Me. I'm not a Black woman living in the 20th century in the American South, but it helps me think about what is it like to be a gay diabetic man living in the South in the 21st century. And if she could write an essay like that, could I write my own essay? I bet she struggled with self doubt. I'm sure Plato struggled. Well, maybe Plato didn't struggle with it. The Greeks loved Plato and stuff. But to think, since others have done it, that gives me enough chutzpah to think, well, I can do it. And I think when you come from, again, a place where, I mean, I could just say, Megan, name a famous North Dakota writer. Long silence, and our most famous Louise Erdrich actually just lives near you in the Twin
Yes.
Cities.
Yes.
She doesn't live in none of us live in North Dakota who are writers. And so when you acknowledge that there is a largely empty bookshelf of a vital region to our country, uh, there just becomes this whole way of occupying that space of story, that part of the pickle I might think that we're in as a nation right now is because we've reduced rural America to one thing, flyover country. There are a lot of people living in flyover country, and those people may very well feel lonely in the stories that they're reading about where they live, having their stories told by other people as well. And I think for a long time as a writer, I've we often talk in the creative writing classroom, who's your audience? Who's your audience? And that question sometimes just exhausts me of like, oh, I'm writing for queer people. Well, there are a lot of different queer people, Megan, on the planet. Like, I probably have more in common with someone who votes very differently from me, who grew up in rural Kentucky, than I do with a gay person who grew up in Los Angeles. You know what I mean? And so I, and because I'm inherently lazy, for me, the stories I've been working on, I think of one person. I've just imagined this person, but do you know where Broadus, Montana is?
No, but
You shouldn't.
I
I mean,
drove through a lot of Montana
yeah,
last summer.
yeah. If you'd have to be off the interstate, that's just the point. Is like no
Yeah.
one goes to Broadus. I mean, I don't even. I've never even been to Broadus. But I know where it is. But that I keep thinking there's got to be a 12-year-old boy who's questioning who he is in that town. That's who I'm writing for.
Yeah.
That one person. It's almost like books become this long letter to this person to just say, here's what I experienced. Now I'm going to give it to you. And that might be exactly how you experience life. It might be somewhat like how you've experienced. It might not at all be like how you've experienced, but that creates a conversation. And I think that's what telling our stories does. I mean, start talking about your grandma. Someone else is going to hop in and start talking about their grandma. That stories beget other stories for us as well. So
Hmm.
I think they help us remember and they help us feel less alone. And they also present us with options.
Yep.
And I think that's been so helpful. That's why for me, like going to college was so helpful, that I was surrounded by people who read books. I grew up in a household where reading wasn't encouraged. If I was caught with a book, my parents would say, go and do something. And so I think whether you're reading those stories on the page or you're hearing those stories said out loud, they also give us options for who, maybe ways of looking at who we've been, and then let us ask questions of who we want to become as well.
Yeah. Mm. And really just that lived history, right? It's not just history in a book. It's one person's lived life, that
Yeah.
example. And like you said, that becoming, seeing different examples of just how to live, how to be, how to work, how to heal, everything we've been talking about today. And so I'm just so grateful that you have this work that you're doing and you're sharing how to show up for it and you're sharing your stories with the world. I can't wait for more writing to come, and we'll be seeing you at Moon Palace Books in Minneapolis on June 4th. You have your paperback coming out for Boys in Oil. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm very excited because the Wall Street Journal just earlier this year is saying a lot of publishers of nonfiction are doing away outright with paperback books, that
Wow.
most of us will have to get used to the idea if we're buying a physical book, it will most likely only be in hardback,
Mm-hmm.
which that price point, as we know, is higher than a paperback. And so I just love knowing 3 years after the original publication of the book, not only is it getting another little boost with now going into paperback, but that it might become more accessible to people, particularly people who don't do audiobooks or read on Kindle, that they now will have a smaller, more compact version they can throw in their backpack. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just thrilling. It's thrilling that it'll take me to new parts of the country for some conversations. And it's always nice to have a book, though this is the same book, but just a different version going out in the world. I anticipate hearing from more readers once it's in paperback too, which is always such a humbling and gratifying thing. I mean, I've sent letters to hundreds of writers I've admired. And so when you start getting your own, I mean, usually they reduce people to tears. So it's
Mm.
really nice. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'm so excited for that. And so there's a lot to come with you and your work, and people can find you. We're going to link to your Boys in Oil book and your Instagram. But is there any kind of takeaway you want our listeners to have after our conversation today?
Yeah, I think with the conversation we've been having and the space we've been holding together is to bring it back to what my therapist asked me, how can we be more curious? Whatever we're going through in life. And is that an invitation to take up a new hobby, a new passion project, set a different goal for yourself that you didn't have before, cook a little bit more for yourself, but how can you just be more attentive and curious about the life you're living, and to see where you can make some shifts if things are no longer working for you, to feel that you do have agency rather than being the victim of your life, to be a agent of change for yourself. So for me, that's been looking like writing. Writing is the way that I've understood my life, been able to view my history, maybe articulate my hopes and dreams as well. But for someone else, it might be, I don't know, alpine skiing. For to be reminded
Right.
we don't have to think we're fully formed at any stage, and we can be curious and change things that are no longer serving us.
Mm. Yeah, be curious and non judgmental.
Right, exactly.
And noticing how much our society works to keep us judging and pitted against each other, and how your work and what you're advocating for sounds like belonging,
Mm.
connection, sharing wisdom, like honoring each other's truth. And that sounds healing in and of itself.
Well, thank you, Megan, and thank you for this conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon, and just we'll look forward to following your work.
Thanks so much, Megan.